Hey, hi, and welcome to our new episode wherein we are going to discuss. It is just going to be a discussion where we are casually discussing about things which are pulled under the rug in corporate world, and very few limelight is given to this particular topic. Today I have with me Shruti. Shruti is
Hi,
hi.
Abhijit.
Yeah. Okay. So
Thank you for having me here, by the way.
yeah, thank you. I'm pleased to have you on this particular
Yeah.
discussion because the kind of discussion and the depth we were able to achieve in our discussion of the topic of employee engagement
Yeah.
has been very insightful, and I want this particular discussion to be a kind of a ready reckoner
Yeah.
for most of the employees or our viewers who's going to watch this particular
Yeah.
discussion, not a podcast, but a discussion which can help you to checklist certain things to make a corporate environment more psychologically safe for your
Exactly.
employee,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So we're going to start this discussion. We have certain set of questions, which we'll have a exchange of thoughts on that,
Yeah.
and we'll try to give our 2 cents in which it makes a little bit of sense with the kind of stories, the kind of experience,
Yeah.
and the walk and the journey that we have together.
Yeah.
All right.
I agree.
So great. So let me ask you the first question, Shruti.
Please go ahead.
Why you have chosen employee engagement as your cornerstone or a centerpiece of your PhD?
Okay, so I'm really thrilled to answer you this question because it has actually a very long explanation, but I'll cut it short.
Mm.
I was always interested in people, first of all,
Mm.
and then I was always interested in language, and that
Okay.
brought me to the excellent communication
Mm.
background.
Mm.
And that was always my way of being in general life and so in corporate life.
Right.
And I don't think at this stage of life it is a wrong statement to do that. We all of us spend almost 75% to 80% of our life in
Mm.
as a work life.
Right.
Yeah, so I feel that it's extremely important to have exceptionally great hold on our workplace when it comes to the mental health as well.
Great.
So that is how I came to
Mm.
this topic,
Mm.
that if we are talking about the mental health and the resilience at the workplace, then it starts always from the employee engagement perspective.
True.
Employee engagement is nothing for me but the safety, the psychological safety that people feel while they are working in their day-to-day life.
Mm.
And it needs some more light to be shed on it.
True.
And that is how I came to this topic. So, while coming to this topic, it was very easy for me to address few of the main points or the main cursors, I would call as.
Mhm.
One is, as we said, you rightly said, psychological safety, and that is how I got to know basically because the way you are functioning through your collaboration and the consultation service of WisdomSeed.
Mm.
I was extremely thrilled to have similar psychological interest having person on the board. And yeah, so that is, I think, the main reason that I am here and we both are talking here about the
Right.
same. I'm thrilled, genuinely.
I'm glad that
May I know that
Ah.
why and how you could start so accurately
Mm.
your venture known as Wisdom Seed? What was your idea
Okay.
behind it?
As far as the accuracy part is concerned, I will come to the
Mhm.
question. As far as that thing is
Yeah.
there, I'm still hitting into the darkness of it. I know,
Okay.
I know, I know this issue is a kind of a pain area,
Yeah.
and being into corporate world for past 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
to be more precise,
Mm-hmm.
I felt a dire need of human beings are not being treated the way human has to be treated, wherein psychological safety becomes an important and integral part of a corporate culture,
So on point.
right?
So on point, Abhijit.
But the
Great.
thing is, like, we are only half-heartedly we're doing one thing that is a checklist box that
Yeah.
a lot of corporate organization, and that is not out of ignorance, but out of awareness. I would say the awareness is not there, and as we are progressing towards new millennials or absorbing generation alpha and generation Z
Yeah.
and generation beta, which will be coming in next
Yeah.
15 years of into workforce, I felt that the workforce would be far more evolved
Mm.
when it comes to psychological safety because they would be far more self-aware.
Yeah,
They would be very much giving credit to work-life balance.
definitely.
And if the future employers
Mm.
are not able to incorporate or accept
Mm-hmm.
or have a policy build around it,
Mm.
then as an employer will be crippled. We won't be able to absorb a talent which or harness the talent
Mm-hmm.
which would be aligned to
Mm.
what we want to achieve in future generations.
Mm.
So this was the gap what I felt like. This was not a gap, but this was something was missing
Mm.
totally when it comes to, because being an HR,
Mm.
we function in a very policy driven kind of an environment.
Mm.
We have a lot of bureaucracy.
Mm.
We do like these are the 5 steps that we have to do if somebody comes in an organization.
Mm.
Then these are the 5 steps if we want to understand what is the role requirement as far as skill sets and behavioral sets are there.
Mm. True.
But once we have that kind of framework
Mm.
and we try and put a person into that framework where personal individuality is something that Generation Z, Alpha, and Beta would be cherishing it more. Okay. And this is where the myopic version of the policy is there.
Mm.
So I felt like let me have an angle of human centric, or psychological safety centric consultation
Mm-hmm.
in making the corporate aware of that the psychological safety has to be given to the employee,
Mm.
and the employee himself have to develop an emotional resilience to work into a high pressure job and high pressure organization.
Mm.
Because we can't deny the fact that we can't discount the pressure that is there as a corporate environment, as a corporate employee. I can't
Definitely.
discount that the stress would be
I
good.
agree.
No, I can make you resilient.
I agree.
Or
Agree.
else I can have mental resilience as a part of their let's say skill sets.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not have people only very much like, let's say skill sets can be taught, can be learned,
Yeah.
but emotional resilience has to be practiced.
Yeah.
Whatever you like. And whatever whichever gray areas that you have,
Mm-hmm.
or whichever brighter area that you have,
Mm-hmm.
you have to talk about those as well in your interview.
Perfect.
You can't say
Absolutely.
you can't say that I am totally I'm very hard with myself.
Yeah.
I'm like insensitive when it comes to emotions.
Yeah.
But I would prefer an employee who is emotionally aware of himself. I would prefer an employee who is self-aware. Why? Because if he's self-aware, he knows what would be his boundaries. And why? Because if you know your boundaries,
Yeah.
you are actually safeguarding yourself as an employee
Right.
from burnouts.
Right.
Right? Because if you're not aware of your boundaries, you
Yeah.
want to make yourself available to the employer's exploitation.
Yeah.
And unless and until you don't make noise, okay?
Definitely.
If you're not making the noise, how the employer would know, yeah, okay, I'm pushing and he's getting a painful area.
I know.
Right?
I know.
So this is where it is nothing that I want to have a winning side for the employer,
Yeah.
and a losing side for the employee. I
Yeah.
want a win-win for both of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
employee and employer. That is how the psychological safety would be assured.
Yeah. True.
So that was the entire encapsulation of my version of why
Wisdom
Seed is
seed.
there. And as part as consulting is done, as far as emotional awareness, making people resilient into that particular area,
Yeah.
setting in policies
Fair.
for corporate which would ensure that psychological safety is provided through AAPs, that is employee assessment programs.
Mm.
Now it is very taken very lightly in Indian setups.
Yeah.
Though it is an MNC,
Agreed.
in Indian setup, it is taken very lightly,
Right.
very trivially.
Right.
Where in European countries and other countries take it very, very seriously, and
Yeah.
they have those kind of effect as well.
Yeah.
If you see Switzerland
Mm.
has a very stringent way of looking at employees' mental wellness. And
Yeah.
how it has resulted when it comes to basic, like 8 hours shift,
Yeah. It's
no disturbance policy after going back at work, back at home, having
right.
a very good healthcare policy,
Exactly.
having a psychological safety environment that is there. What is the result out of it? They are able to file for 13 years
Yeah.
patents
Yeah.
for innovations.
Yeah.
Very,
It's a very huge achievement.
yeah, it's a, for a straight 13
I
years.
have come across that very well because, as you already introduced to our viewers, that I'm pursuing my PhD from Swiss School of Business and Management,
Right,
Geneva,
right.
and I have been very closely associated to Switzerland and Germany, or let us say on a broader scale, Europe.
Europe, yeah.
I have come across the same
Mm.
observation that it is very, very, very essential to have that work-life balance, and they have been able to achieve it beautifully.
Right.
I have never seen a country like Germany or Switzerland ever seen people feeling those burnouts.
Right.
I've never seen someone staying for more than 7 to 8 hours in the office,
Mm.
and it is completely fine, and they are still doing fine.
Mm.
And sometimes I feel that it is necessary to adopt these kind of work-life balance technicalities in the Indian work culture, because somewhere we being right now the country who is looked upon with the very high hopes, the corporates are under frivolous pressure, which is a very, very, very uh, good sign of growth, and immense level of responsibility is there on our shoulders, especially after Modi ji has brought Make in India and so on. But then I don't know how much pressure the employees would be able to weigh on their shoulders on the day-to-day level. And while doing that, are they really happy doing it? Or are they feeling pressurized every day in and out? And that brings out, I think, our discussion to even better light. And many viewers would love it, because I see every other employee has some or the other issues going on in their work life, which is very natural because we are dealing with the humans at the end of the day. But then very few are able to or capable enough to speak about it, as you rightly said. There, I think we
Need to work
as
on that.
we as probably the speakers can give better ideas to the employees to think for their mental awareness and well-being and so on. So when well-being is considered, often people consider only the physical well-being.
Right.
And there is something where I would like to pitch in, and I would say that let us focus first on the psychological well-being, the mental well-being, and automatically the physical well-being will be taken care of.
I think what you have rightly said, like yes, definitely there are two things that I want to point out.
Yeah.
And it is regarding the responsibility, like who is responsible for the mental wellness or the psychological safety of an employee.
Yeah.
We always have this particular split between the corporate world, like mental wellness or psychological safety or being emotional resilience. Let's talk about emotional resilience. Has to be developed by individual. Okay. True. Okay.
It's a very long
Yeah.
term
Yeah,
process.
it's a fine.
It's a very big process one has to go through. But to understand, you said rightly, is that one has to at least begin it by acknowledging it, the acknowledging of the lack of it.
Yeah, I would give you a good example. What happens, in my previous organization,
Yeah.
when I had let's say, a manager, a dysfunctional manager. So now I used to work under that particular manager, that particular role, I would say. And I would never blame a manager in that particular part, but as a human being, okay, being from an HR fraternity, and you know, you actually sense certain kind of a pressure, certain kind of emotional trauma a person is going into. And if you're not able to sense that, then you don't deserve to be in human resource. Right? Because if
Beautifully said.
yeah,
Thing,
because
I
if
must agree.
if
Yeah.
you're not able to sense that, then what is the what is the purpose of that?
Yeah.
I don't want a human resource department to be a kind of a monitoring or a clerical or something. Uh, a department has lost its credibility, and why we are called as human resource as a Rangoli department is because of that only. It is a very bad name that which is tagged on our forehead, that it's a Rangoli department. I think human resource department has to prove that particular grit and might through you making a conscious effort.
Yeah.
By either being in the system or being outside of the system. Okay. Now, when I say out of the system, I'm not saying that it is nothing that has to be bashed to the employers. We are not going to bash them. We are just, prompting towards the deficiency. When you have a patient, We don't bash him for, you have a
Some health
deficiency. Let's say
Yeah.
B12 is like gone down, and I won't bash you like, how
Yeah.
come you're not able to,
Yeah.
have a B12 deficiency? How come you're like, what I will do? I will recommend that have a B12 supplements.
Right.
Take B3 kind of injections. So that is what we are trying to do this particular when you are outside of the system.
Right.
When you're inside of the system, make sure that everybody's safe. Okay, at least advocate for them.
Yeah.
I would always say that advocate.
Right.
Don't make it a kind of a tug war between the employee and the employer.
Right.
As an HR, you have to be like, okay, I have to facilitate a certain kind of win-win situation.
True.
Not 100%, but at least something 60, 70, but close to 50%. At
Yeah.
least we can do that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to emotional resilience, the coming back to the original question, like whose responsibility it is? Okay.
I think the responsibility goes towards the employer, and as much as employer, it always goes towards the employees too.
You rightly said, because how
As
come? How come? Because both of them are entering into a contract, employment contract,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You
Any
are supposed
contract
to,
is always two-sided.
yeah.
And I feel that employees are equally responsible for having the good time, whatever they would be having in the workplace, and the leadership or the employer, let us call it as, they are also somewhere very responsible for creating that safe place for their employees. Sometimes what I feel that happens in a very huge country like India, and because of the very high population that we have by God's grace, little bit human resource is taken for granted.
I
I'm
think
talking about the human
majority,
resource.
yeah, means what
I'm
you're
talking
trying
about the availability of the people in general. So to say this point, I would say, brought me to this topic even for my further research. That if tomorrow Shruti is not there, or let us say if tomorrow Abhijit is not there in the organization, does the organization really miss these two people for their skill sets and for their unique existence? So the answer is unfortunately no, because there are multiple Shrutis and there are multiple Abhijits available, and that is somewhere bottling up in the minds and eventually boiling down to the taking for granted of the resources that are available.
You rightly, pinpointed one thing that
Yeah.
that usually comes to, everybody, whether it is you are an employee or an employer, whichever end of the discussion that you are, that if I have a role, if I have a person, okay, am I replaceable or not? Okay, definitely you're replaceable. Definitely that is not
Yeah.
happening because you are at the end, you are actually pushing tasks and you're solving problems.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing emotional about it.
Yeah.
But what lies undercurrent behind it is that particular task or problem solving, is it taking toll on your mental well-being?
Yeah.
That is one thing that has to
That
be.
is very
Now
important
that
to be
has to be
taken.
calibrated by whom? First, that has to be flagged by the employee that yes, I'm feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm feeling the pressure. I'm not able to concentrate. I'm not able to do because even manager is an employee. Okay, I'm not saying that managers are everybody's bad. Everybody's having certain kind of challenges which they bring to the work, and there is no switch that is there in your mind that you can flip and you are like into work zone. You flip back, you're in home zone. No, you are going to carry that pressure, that emotions to your work as well.
Yeah. True.
Now, once you have this particular thing, but you are not able to handle those, you don't have the resilience.
Yeah.
Okay, this is
Yeah.
where, yeah, I would say that yes, you are replaceable. You are going to be there. But the communication gap regarding the emotional effects. Okay, if you are exhausted, like let's take a physical example. If your work involves 4 hours standing and working on a conveyor belt, and you are feeling exhausted, fatigued by your body, you will have a half an hour of a break.
Yeah.
Right? 4 hours, half an hour break, again 4 hour duty, half an hour break. That is how manufacturing works.
Yeah.
But are we doing something for our cognitive employees?
Yeah.
We are not. What we are doing, we are expecting them to do all those work. And it has been scientifically proven that
True.
you can focus maximum to 25 minutes on a given task
Yeah. At a go.
at a go. Now that particular attention span and the emotional resilience and the stress resilience or the cognitive resilience has reduced down to the the use of social media, the use of exposure, or not social media but the exposure to the screens. We are not only exposed to one screen, we are exposed to multiple screens. We are
Right.
exposed to our laptops, then
Yeah.
we go back, we are exposed to our mobile phones,
Right.
then we are exposed to our televisions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then the cycle goes on.
Yeah.
And scientifically, when I say that why it has been proven that your mental cognitive, there is a kind of a bandwidth that is there.
Yeah.
You can
Everything's
extract and
happening.
absorb. You can extract and absorb information to a certain level.
Yeah.
So there will be a lot of time that you will feel like I'm exhausted or I'm just tipping over burnout.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is a very common feeling
Right.
I have come across
Hmm.
while working in my work life for almost now. I'm having an experience of around 10 years
Hmm.
where multiple organizations I saw. The best example I had always was with my earlier organization where I was working for a German organization and I was working for the Switzerland part into it.
Hmm.
And my client was exceptionally great.
Hmm.
And what I understood is that there's always a huge communication gap about the severity and the intensity of the urgency of the work
Hmm.
that the client is expecting from the overseas
Hmm.
with the Indian counterpart.
Right.
And I don't know why, but Indian counterparts are so much designed in a way that they always feel a particular task is always on a fire, while the other
Hmm.
part
Hmm.
or the client part is never like that.
Hmm.
I have seen always the deficit
Hmm.
between the communication which I'm getting from my Indian boss and which I'm getting from my um,
European boss.
like European boss, we
Counterpart.
can say, or the European counterpart.
Hmm.
And the European counterpart has always been chilled around it.
Hmm.
And the Indian bosses are always worried about it,
Hmm.
how the things will be done, how the things will be done. And the in between fact is that the work is still getting done.
Hmm.
And then why the pressure is being created,
Hmm.
you know?
Look, this is how I would say this is a myopic version of how leadership functions in India
Yeah.
and how leadership functions in Europe. Now, European leadership has been fortified and safeguarded by policies, by laws,
Yeah.
which make them abide by the
100%.
rules. Abide by the
100%.
rules. Where
Yeah.
we can take the example of
And also one more thing I would like to add to this point of yours, which is a very important point, is there is exceptional level of uniformity.
yeah, I would just come to that particular part.
Yeah.
Why what I was explaining is that the counterparts what are there. Why and I
Yeah.
would say this is a cultural construct that is
Yeah.
being created.
Yeah.
How it is being created, like in India, we have this particular kind of a mentality that we are like most of the time you will see that we have most of clients who are overseas. Okay. We are still operating on a terms of BPOs, no matter whichever, like business processing outsourcing or even KPOs.
Yeah.
That is the setup that we have. Okay. We tend to call ourselves sometimes like, okay, we are a captive kind of person. We have our product line, but
Yeah.
at the end you're serving a client. Most of it. Most of the IT companies are doing that. Some would be selling their software, but they are aligned to the requirement of the customers who are abroad. Okay, and they are serving them abroad one. So now once you have that kind of a mentality set up, okay, and once the balance has been tilted or shifted or is gone to an extreme end, okay, this is where the the social construct that I was talking about, that Indian bosses are far more pushed to the edge already. Okay, because of the
Perfect.
competition. Okay,
Perfect. That's
because
what.
of the competition that is going on,
Right.
because of the favoritism that is going on, because of deficient labor laws that are there. Okay, so it is not a one person problem, it's a system problem. It is not a one person problem.
Definitely.
We are actually, when we
This is
talk
how
about
the people are being trained for years long.
year long, and why? Because now it has to change. Why it has to
I
change?
think this
Because
is somewhere, I think we can also bring in probably the idea of generational gap and the trauma that comes along with the generational gap. I think the leaders before, let us say 20 years back down the line, they were having some sort of specific ways of running a company, let us say, or an organization. Now those ideas or the ways of thinking are no more valid because of the exceptional and the exponential surge in the technologies and the AI and so on. And that is how I think the whole friction between the different layers of the workplace are coming to the witness, right? And when we come to that, I think there is a little bit of rigidity which comes from the old generations,
You,
where they are not able to think about how the younger generations or the new generations are thinking about the same given issue or the same given problem or the challenge. So why do you think basically that there is a such a huge difference between both the settings when we are now probably last 20 to 25 years bare minimum collaborating on a very high level, and last 5 years or 10 years we have seen a massive increase in the west and east collaborations in terms of, for example, we can take German sectors entering India and collaborating on the new projects, and especially the service industries getting the back end offices in India. And we are like right now considering India as a massive growing economy, and which is supposed to be in the first five best economies of the world. Yet, why the Indians are facing more troubles in the work front compared to the West?
No, it's a very valid question. We are not saying that we are not going to directly compare with what West is doing. West has a different set of problems in comparison to India. But the threshold, okay, the threshold, that is the bare requirement that is there, which is very well sorted into Western countries. Now, when I talk about the bare minimum of any work environment that is there, it talks about psychological safety, and we have already mentioned that psychological safety is there, and everybody is affected by how the level of psychological safety is there.
Yeah.
When I talk about that, the major challenge that comes is into the mindset of what is the environment that is created.
Right.
So if you have an environment that is a work environment which is more hostile, when I say hostile, it usually cancel out all the diversity inclusion for, principles that are there, which are to be checklisted and which are the fundamental building blocks of trust. Because if you are not including or if you're not considering the diversity of India and where India is so vibrant when it comes to culture, language, perspective,
Religions,
okay, even the socio-economical fabric in which everybody is embedded in a different level, and then we have to consider those things. But what we are doing, we are having a parameters, and it is just like everybody is given equal opportunity, and we are saying that fish has to climb the tree. That is the parameter that has been given. It's a very classic meme that is there.
Yeah.
But the problem is in a certain way that none of us is highlighting that particular issue. We
Yeah.
are not highlighting it often enough. I'm saying there is a highlight, but it is not often enough highlighted because we as a human beings we tend to forget a lot many things in the general crux or the general crush of the life.
Right.
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 There is some sensational news, then something happens, there is some kind of discrimination that happens, and then we just go back to our ordinary life.
Yeah.
For that, whenever you are saying that psychological safety should not be a trend, it has to be love.
Yeah,
Because
it has to be a basic
it is
thing which is getting ticked actually.
yeah, not tick, but it has to be a threshold. Because if you are expecting someone to come and work with you, and when you are, giving them back to society at the end of 60 years of service or 60 years of age,
Yeah.
don't give a psychopath at the end to the society. What we are doing is like
Or we
anybody,
are at least giving a stressed human being
yeah,
who is not able to
non-functional.
do a non-functional human
Yes.
being, which I think is a very unfair thing.
Unfair thing because
Yeah.
you are is I think the biggest CSR activity an organize or a company or an employer can do is take care of your employee more and give them a balanced life. That is more of a CSR than anything going to an NGO and doing all those things. Because if the employees are happy, they're going to make the surrounding happy.
Yeah.
I would say not happy because happiness is like a fleeting kind of an emotion, but I would say driven by purpose or driven by some contentment or they see meaning in their roles. And a person would find their own meanings if an environment is given to them. If you're not giving, if you're giving, like let's say example, if every day we have to get up and search for food, that would be such a kind of a chaos. We know our fridges are stuffed with food. We know our kitchens are stuffed with the grocery. So that kind of psychological safety is there. That's why we are able to operate every morning and go with our life. Same thing happens with the threshold psychological safety that has to be given in the in our work environment. So that is the main thing. Okay. So that possibility that is there, and nobody is checking it. As I told you, that has to be made as a part of an imbibe into the culture. It is very good decorated in terms of policies that are there. Okay. Now, policy making, which are to be human centric in terms of psychological safety or not, that is a management decision. That is a collaborative decision, definitely, but it has to propagated by the management and
Right.
maintained and sustained by the management.
Right.
Because it's your premises where the employees are coming in.
True.
It is your home, for example.
True.
So why you are expecting the other person to act or take the responsibility of him his own when he is operating in your environment, which is controlled by the employer, not by the employee. Is it controlled by the employee? No, it is controlled by the employer. So I was talking about that you have to give a functional employee at the end, and not at the end means at the end of the service, at the end of his working hours.
Yeah.
Right, working hours के बाद में he has to go back home and be sane enough to give time to his wife, his children, and that's how it is more CSR activity rather than just giving free donation and all those things, because the first person who you are directly affecting is your employees.
True.
And the last one is the customer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, at the chain, but definitely we are making it customer centric. But I think if you make it a little bit of employee centric, I'm not saying give them 100% discount, but bare minimum. So what is that bare minimum? When I say talk about that, make sure that your environment is not ostracizing people on their ethnicity, caste, belonging, social structure. Okay, even the different sexes that are working there, the demographics. Okay, because if you see, we tend to have, and that is more rampant in this age and time, that there is a language war that is going on. Speaking
A language war is very huge. I saw that more on the language war part. I would clearly say that I have seen that being on a very high level right now in the European countries compared to India.
Yeah, with language,
It is also
if that is a different story altogether. I'm talking about the continent, subcontinent India, which has almost like hundreds of language. Okay.
Yeah, we
But then
ourselves
also
are having so much to handle on a day-to-day basis.
day-to-day life,
But
right?
then I don't see where my discomfort probably came, which brought me to this level of magnificent idea of studying the integral part of the employee engagement, which is the whole and soul bread and butter actually of the organization, I feel.
But how much we are
I feel, yeah, but I felt really deep down somewhere sad when I myself experienced at few of my experiences in my working life. There was no diversity, I would say, which was respected in a way it was supposed to be or it is called for. When we are talking about our own country, about India as a one of the best diversified country and the country which follows the statement of unity in diversity, somehow that part is not being followed when it comes to the corporate world. And the more the diversity, the more the conflicts are arising. Why that is going so radically tangent on another opposite side of the whole ball game. I don't understand that.
It's a very simple, simple equation.
Yeah.
Shruti. Uh, the same man who is, criticizing women, the same man who is
Criticizing men.
favoritizing,
Yeah.
favoritizing
Man.
certain political
Yeah.
party,
Yeah.
The same person who is criticizing a certain ethnicity into a country is the same guy who's working in that corporation.
Mm-hmm.
We have to see human as a whole. We can't segregate, that this is the organization altogether. We are expecting that. It is not supposed to be done. As I told you earlier, it is a system issue. It is not an individual issue.
Mm.
When it comes to employee engagement, okay, we have to, as an organization and as a country, because CSR, as I told you, it is not giving some kind of help to the underprivileged. We have to see that nobody is underprivileged. That is a CSR. Okay? Why we have to have someone who has to be underprivileged? Why? That is first question. Are we still ruled by British government? No. Are we still somewhere dictatorship is going on? No. We are in a democratic country. Then if it is happening, that means we are failing. That is a parameter. As I told you, the parameters of psychological safety starts with how the polarity is there, how the polar part is there. We are saying that we are greatest country in the world who imbibe the quality of diversity, unity in diversity. But we just say it for the words.
Yeah,
It's
we
just
don't really mean it.
we.
That is the very huge issue I'm finding in general on the level of implementing some belief and just believing it. I think just for the sake of saying it, we are always talking about a lot of ideologies or we are comparing, we are just plainly, let us say, and let us take a beautiful example of Instagram. We are every day watching so many reels which are talking about the mental health, which are talking about the physical health, which are talking about the balance of these two, and so on. But nobody is really able to understand what really the resilience means when it comes to the workplace balance. And I feel that resilience part is being taken in a very individualistic or a subjective way. And unless and until we have some kind of understanding on a regular basis done from the awareness, from the goal, we have to keep the goal of having the awareness of this psychological safety part as a prima facie requirement in the offices. I don't think, unless and until we educate people, I don't think we will be able to attain it.
Right.
And how to educate people to then first CSR activity I would suggest from my end for the corporates is that the way we conduct normal trainings in the day-to-day life for the employee upliftment or from the L&D section of the big companies. L&D, I mean learning and development. So through one of the biggest section needs to be also there for the psychological safety and the awareness. And in that probably we can inculcate lot of new practices and lot of new educated we have to literally educate people because after communicating with so many people for so many years now, what I realized in my work front also and in my personal front also, when my friends tell me their work life stories, some of the people are not even aware of certain terminologies. Let us say, like what we can talk about on a big level is micromanagement, the way we learn nowadays. Even there is something known as burnouts, there is something known as microaggression, there is something known as passive aggression. So these terminologies people need to know and they need to know that meaning in the depth. Unless and until they know it, they will not know what is happening to them. Initially, India was not understanding psychological services and the psychological upliftment part to an extent till COVID hit all of us, and COVID gave by default so much of time for us to sit with ourselves. When we got all that time, people started knowing that there is some issue with me, there is some issue with the other person in the family, there is some issue with my spouse, there is some issue with my sibling, there is some issue with my children. Why these things could surface? Because they got that much of time to be together and to be with themselves. And when it was there was no option but to mingle around each other under the same roof, people started understanding and got surfaced lot of psychological traumas, lot of psychological issues which are going on probably for many, many years. But that is the time I think we have broken the massive ice, where at least the psychological services have come into the picture now. And the people are at least few generation, I would talk like our generation, like we come under millennial. And I think our generation is the only generation now probably who is going to witness the best of the both the sides. Yeah, because we have learned about the older generations, we have been handling our grandfathers, grandmothers, and so on. And on the other hand, we are also handling the other younger generations. The millennials are still, I would say, the people who are quite balanced ones, who have seen the both, you know. But at the same time, I still feel that all these terminologies, all this comfort to be around uh, the psychological safety part and the psychological awareness part still stems from the fact that there should not be the stigma around it. And I still see a lot of stigma around a lot of people.
That's what I'm saying. Na? That why that is there. We have put in like 3-4 points
Yeah.
for the entire conversation.
Yeah.
That first was like why we are looking at this particular part.
Yeah.
In certain kind of areas and not in other areas. That was
Yeah.
one thing. Second, what I have realized that if we are as a culture, okay, as a culture, we are looking at, as I told you earlier, that the entire psychological fire that is there, or the uncertainty that is what we are experiencing, maybe through microaggression, maybe through micromanaging, maybe through burnouts. It's all misaligned emotional resilience. It's misaligned.
It's
Because
misaligned.
because why it is misaligned? Why these are the repercussions of why we are not putting it tamed? Because it is already said that if you are not able to recognize, as you said, that there was no glossary, no definition of psychological aspects. When COVID hit, then we realized that these are things are there. But let me tell you one thing: we as a culture are very enriched with self-analysis. We are very enriched in our scriptures, in Mahabharata, in Buddhism, in Jainism, even in Quran and Bible. We have a lot many examples of psychological tools that we are supposed to recite every time. But now, what is the problem? All that psychological, knowledge or literature that is there, it has become more of a performative, performance-wise. We are not making it as a ingrained part of us. We have to just perform it. We are there, we are just performing. Aham Brahmasmi, we will say. Okay? We'll say like Yada Yadadi Dharmasya. We'll say all that. But the problem is we are not able to imbibe those particular qualities in us. Why it is that? Because our entire environment that has been created don't appreciate emotional expression. As you rightly said, that if you are a man, you're supposed to act in a certain way. If you're a woman, you have to act in a certain way. There is the divide. If you're a boss, you have to act in a certain way. If you're an employee, you have to act in a certain way. If you're an HR, you have to act in a certain way.
Yeah, I
But this
completely understand.
this kind of over identification with the roles, over emphasizing on certain characteristic outputs has bottled up a person into four walls, which is not giving you any outlet. That is one thing. And I'm directly pointing that at the environment. So, as you said rightly, that yes, we have to start with awareness and education first. Okay. But it has to start very early, not when you are an employee, when you are kids. When you are an aspirant of certain, when you are kids, when you are in college, when you are an aspirant of certain field, let it be commerce, let it be finance, let it be aeronautical, whichever field it is, and understand what is the emotional caliber that you require. Cognitive, yes, everybody knows what you're supposed to require, but what is the emotional caliber that you require to be and sustain in that particular field? There's an example of merchant navy. Lot many people just go to the merchant navy because of the money, the hefty salary that you get on merchant navy. A person will like earn almost like half a crore rupees per month if he's in captain or some other position. But staying on 6 months, departed from your family and children, on ships, which doesn't have any nature or scenic areas. It is just plain water for 6 months straight. And then you're isolated for 6 months without people, and then you come back to your habitat, and then also you're isolated because you practice isolation so much, and you come back, you practice the same thing. Now this is a very extreme example, but let's take example of corporate employees who sit in front of the screen for 10 hours, come back home and do Netflix and chills. Why? Because they only know that to sit. They have mastered that particular part. That's when I'm talking about the boxes that we have created. It is not the tools that are there. It's the box that is being created. It is not the microaggression. It is not the burnout. It is the system that you have created, the environment that you have created, which is leading you to that particular part. So there was an experiment that was done in I think one of the lab that was there, wherein mice were kept in a cage, and he was provided with water with sugar and water with cocaine, and he was not allowed to get out of that particular cage. So as you know that cocaine is very addictive. Okay, so sugar is also addictive, but cocaine is highly addictive. So he keep on drinking that cocaine water till the time he died due to overdose. Now that was suggested that because cocaine was addicted, that's why mice has drink that cocaine. Now what the second experiment is, the same mice was put into a cage, a bigger cage, a playground kind of a thing, wherein there were 40 mice. Okay, and same water and cocaine mixtures were placed over there. Okay, now those particular mice were not drinking that particular water as frequently as they were drinking in the confined cage. So the conclusion was cocaine might be addictive, but what would put you in addiction is the confinement. Understood. Social setup, yeah, social setup would never ever keep you confined. Yeah. Because if you talk with people, if you have a community, if you have support, you tend to get diverted from addictions. Yeah. You have people to talk to, support, they are there, then you would be not addicted to addictive substance, no matter how much addicted they are. So isolation is the problem. And when I say isolation, isolation also happens about roles. Your role is an isolation. You don't identify yourself as a whole. Yeah, you as a just company identify yourself as a particular role that you are doing. As even in India, even in countries, we identify ourselves as Hindus. But I think a good point you got it here is like I feel another problem I saw frequently coming in today's time, especially in the Indian corporate sector, is also the role ambiguity. But why we I have think to have role ambiguity is also coming because of the lack of communication. Because if there is a lack of communication, eventually you are not letting your subordinate or your employee, and there is no great communication between the employer and the employee, or the leadership and the subordinates in a right way, which is fueling the eventually happening relationship between the two of them. And that creates a lot of role ambiguity, is what I realized. Because I myself went through a lot of role ambiguity experience, and that is what fueled my decision of taking a backseat from the corporate world as of now. And I feel that it just requires more work when it comes to the assigning of roles. Or if I would also suggest in the new coming times, if we are able to take, I'm asking you from an HR perspective, is it possible, Abhijit, anywhere to have a test which we do generally for intelligence quotient part, in terms of understanding how the candidate is performing in terms of the requirement of the company and the role assigned to him or her? Can we also run a test which is going to be headed towards the emotional intelligence part, and can we also have some kind of uh, referring to that in terms of declaring or having at least an idea what a person is going through
or what the person is not wanting to go through, or what triggers the person, what doesn't trigger the person, and as a community, working community, if we are able to take care of it in a beautiful way, I think there won't be a better
Okay.
place
All right.
for
So
us
there are
to survive.
there are three parts to this
And it won't be a journey of survival. I put it would be a journey of happiness. It would be a journey of being happy working, you know.
So there are three parts to your question. Very good question. The first part is there any test that can calibrate what is the emotional status of an employee or not?
Mhm.
The beauty of the test is definitely you can at least place a certain hand, not a pinpoint, but a hand or a probability that this is what is inside him.
Mm.
But that would be just an what I can say, looking or driving a car from a rear mirror.
Mhm.
What is an actual, way of testing a person is putting that particular person in a situation
Mm.
and then looking at his behavior. You on the paper, you can say all the answers, same like we say words, right? But what defines my character is the behavior, the action that I take during that particular situation. So situational based interviews are there already. Most of the people are doing, but then also now Chat GPT and AI coming play. People can be well prepared with the answer, which will convince the interviewer that this is particular thing is happening. And the other risk with this particular test is that will again act as a filter where I will keep on rejecting people because he is not mentally sound. That is also kind of a myopic version. That is also a gray area.
You're right.
Your
Right.
tests are
I
not
think,
foolproof. Just
yeah,
same like our blood
yeah,
test. It is a probability
yeah,
that and everybody's BP is different because your body is different.
yeah.
We have a categorization in
To each his
120.
own, as we see, it's very unique. Yeah,
It's a unique body setup, and
yeah,
we try to make an assumption, but that assumption can't be a parameter
yeah,
for rejection and selection. Yes, it can be a parameter to
yeah.
categorize them into one category, but can't pinpoint it.
No, but if we don't keep the final aim to categorize anybody, but in order to not have the categorization in future, it's
Same,
better.
the same thing that I told you. If you have a policy framework, which is more of a playground than the cage of the mice should always
Mhm.
elect or select community purpose over the cocaine and the sugar water.
Mhm.
Are your policies, are your test, are your job ambiguity that you talked about, role ambiguity, are those cage or playgrounds? That is what, because it is a cage. Because why ambiguity is there? Because you are expected to do certain roles.
Yeah,
You're not able to do it.
yeah,
You're not able to find meaning.
yeah.
Right?
Right.
Because if you're not able to find out meaning, I'm not able to associate with it. If I'm not able to associate it, I will perform, and I will burn out.
Mhm.
That is what the problem with every job role that is there. Okay. Now we have to look in the age of AI jobs very differently.
Mm.
It has always been said that if
Mm.
what would be the I always say in my most of my workshops and most of the time that if AI takes all our jobs, if AI takes all our job, what is one job that a person or a human being would be left with?
Mm.
Hmm? What would be the compensable factor that on which he or she can earn?
Mm.
So what is that?
Mm.
What is one thing that
feel
what is one thing that differentiates us from AI or which can be
I
done as?
think I think that's a very, very interesting question. I have not ever been to be in so much of the favor of AI because I have always felt that this is something which is extremely useful, but it is also extremely risky because it is taking out the creativity part out of the humans. And the moment I feel the creativity of humans is going to be hindered in some or the other way, it's going to be a even more psychological, traumatic situation that probably we are headed to in
I
the
think
new generations. And whatever I have been able to work with the new generations recently, I have realized that people are not even able to write 2 to 3 lines on their own by using their own creative ideas. And I find that somewhere very risky though. But I would still feel in a very great way. We can use AI in a very nice way, but we should not let it overpower us. Still, certain things in the offices can be completely handled by the humans. Otherwise, eventually, we are going to also probably, or we have already started having the issues with the jobs and job profiles to function the same way, because there is no more requirement of lot of uh, work profiles which used to be there earlier, and people are now already resorted to AI, and that is somewhere I find it really risky. The
There are
overall
there are two things that comes in this particular part. Is one is, as you rightly said, the
creativity is being challenged
Yes,
now.
you're talking about what would human being will left with if AI takes all of their job. Is the simple answer is being more human. Okay, if you're a human, what would pay you more is being more human. When I say being more human, is being more intelligent in emotions. Emotional intelligence is what is going to pay you more ahead. Why? Because the entire economy is run by human desire, not by AI. I desire to buy a certain kind of a bag or a system. Okay, if I want to buy a laptop, I would prefer a Mac and not HP and Lenovo. Some would prefer that. It's only because I desire for that.
True that.
Right? If I
Very
want to
happy
buy.
you made this point. I'm very happy.
So,
Kudos to you.
so then what would happen?
Yeah.
Like if the desires are made, AI can't make a desire because as Noir, if I'm not mistaking his name, uh, the author of Nexus, I highly cherish his wisdom and his intellect. Yuval Harari. Okay, that's the guy. And he says so beautifully that AI is not artificial intelligent, AI is alien intelligent. Why? Because AI can't understand what human feels. You can't understand what you value in emotional part. AI can only have verbal understanding of it, but can't have the replication that would be there. I can give you answer with as and part as AI, but to make a sense, to make it acceptable by the society, by other human, you require human touch. You can't rely on AI completely. I have to try and test all those answers for the validity and the application in human life because AI would just give you answer. It won't give you the equation that will be effect. Right. So as we're talking about the desire economy, first of all, the human has to be more human because the emotion part and the desire part comes from the emotion part. And the economy will just crash down, or we have to find a different way of running an economy. In certain areas that are set, there in fictional novels that are there, or even most of the countries are not talking about global base pay. So that if you are out of work, there will be a global base pay given to everybody, so that at least you will survive. If you don't have a job, you'll have some money, but you will survive. That will be global base pay. That kind of idea is coming in. There would be an economy of giftology. A lot of people would be gifting certain items. If I want to, I won't own things now. I would have to go to a mall. I will just take that on a subscription base, or I will just borrow it, use it, and just then return it back. I don't have my own stuff with stuff. So there would be a co-owned assets that would be there. That kind of economy would be coming up. So now, why I'm saying this particular part is why psychologically we have to think into that particular realm because AI is not a future, reality is a reality. That is what is happening. So why emotionally we have to enrich is just to be surviving into the age of AI. That is also important. Yeah. We are not practicing into our human grounds and we are preparing for the future which is far more bleak. We can't compete with AI. Just take that fact. As we are shortly coming to an end of this discussion, I would just like you to summarize whatever we just spoke about in, let us say, around briefly and in a crisp way so that it's easy for our audience to take away something with them at the end of the session. Yeah, there were a lot of small wisdom nuggets or experience nugget that we have embedded in this particular discussion on also. But when you talk about the entire summing up, Rather than summing up, I would just give a direction to what we have discussed till now. Okay. When we talk about emotional or emotional psychological safety, and as we talked about that, there has to be started with awareness about it. Because awareness, we are lacking behind as system. We are looking at system at a very different scenarios. We are looking at it a very box kind of scenario. We're not making it as a something that has to define differently, which has to align with the ongoing progress that is there and the different rule sets. Not rule, but I would say some of the expectation that is there. So that has to bring into. So when it comes to psychological safety, one thing is that we have to look at as a one person, not as a person with a title, not as a person with certain kind of differences, but a person who is whole, who is operating in that particular environment. That is first. Secondly, we have to make sure that the different laws, labor laws, systems, governments, institutes come together and try and understand this particular problem at a grander level, not at a micro level. But as a whole, country as an environment, how we are placing ourselves in that particular thing. Like we have looking at that, we are dropping into our happiness index on global ranking. We're dropping in index of self-expression. We're dropping on the media liberty that is there, or news media liberty that is there. So this indicator itself shows that there is a lack of trust. There is an environment of hostility in the country collectively. There is more sense of and if you see at a lot many things that lot many employees are scooting away from India. Lot many millionaires are going away from India. So they always say that whenever there is any kind of if there is an earthquake, the first uh, animal to run away are the rodents. Okay, because they are like connected to the grounds, right? I'm not comparing people with rodents, but I'm saying that people who are connected with the the fabric of the country, if they are feeling unsafe, they would always scoot away from that particular area if they see that there is a kind of an earthquake that is coming in. So are we making an environment in India so that we are just making our best people to run away? And are we questioning those particular activities and behaviors? We are questioning a lot many things. Which language has to be talking? Which religion has to be followed? What kind of celebrity to be celebrated? How politically correct we are? But are we really making a mindset shift that whatever things that are happening in India are those a kind of a sign of a bigger earthquake that is going to come? Are we pointing towards that, or are we just oblivious to the fact that these things are happening, and we are like wishfully positive or toxically positive that things will turn? The only thing will turn is by practicing and understanding this problem is with us, and collectively we have to answer that. It is not no, we don't have to blame anybody. If you want to blame somebody, go to the mirror, and that's the person who is to be blamed, nobody else. Okay, so that is what is required in today's era.
Yeah,
It's
basically
more than 30
taking the
seconds. But
responsibility.
taking the responsibility of everybody. I'm
Yeah,
not going to say don't
definitely.
pinpoint, just go to the
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Yeah,
So that is my
completely agree.
entire summing up of what is a way forward. And definitely, if anybody wants to get connected with us,
Yeah,
it is there. And I
yeah,
want you to
definitely.
also talk about your view about what we have covered and what you want to talk about.
Yeah. So basically, I feel that whatever we discussed, it was very, very essential on terms of whatever needs to be done in terms of making people psychologically aware and self-aware of the certain psychological facts. And also with the same thing, I would say one more beautiful thing which I learned from my masters. Uh, there are few masters who have always touched my life in so long journey of uh, my corporate and personal and so on life. I would just say that there is nothing good and bad. It's just be either someone is aware or someone is unaware. And I think there is more of unawareness amongst the people right now. And so it's the unawareness on a larger term, I would also say it is also there on the corporate level. It's not that people are not emotionally intelligent or something, but people have somehow made it a norm to make themselves emotionally numb. And because of that numbness, probably a lot of friction is being created. And that, as you rightly said, that if we are talking about the India as an economy, which is going to be probably a multi-trillionaire economy in the coming years. But at the end of the day, if the people of the country and the country which is made out of those people, if people are not going to be psychologically fit to enjoy the fruits of whatever they have been doing for so many years, being mentally healthy, physically healthy, and financially also well to do, then probably all the other factors are going to be of no use.
True.
If they are not going to be there psychologically standing really strong for themselves. And I feel that if the person is not being helped at the workplace to be psychologically fit at the end of the service or at the end of the every working day, then probably we are going to create more havoc in the coming times, which will be even more difficult to handle than any other pandemic. And so to say, I think to conclude, it was very well uh, already predicted by many great researchers and the uh, psychics, or I would say many other people who have been the jargons of the industry. After the COVID, which was the very high pandemic that we saw, I just pray and wish that the psychological pandemic doesn't take a place and then we face some further issues, because if the psychological pandemic takes place, then the journey will become more difficult. And I don't see that India, like a country where the diversity has been always on the top notch, needs to go through this. It's a time that we all become aware of where we are headed to and how we are headed to.
True.
Sometimes it's more important, as rightly said by great philosophers, that the journey is more important than the destination. And right now, I unfortunately see a lot of people behind the destination. So,
Many people are not in the journey as well.
yeah,
They're just stagnant.
they are just
They're
there.
just there.
They are
And
just
just
there. They are just existing.
Mm.
And I would say that being human, we have got the massive blessing in all sorts of form that we can thrive with all the abilities that we have. And if we learn to use our emotional abilities and the emotional quotient in the best possible way, the paving of the way would not be so difficult.
True, true. Great, Shruti. I think we had
Yeah, it was
such a great
great.
discussion. I think
It was
we
great
have
having you as well.
same here, Shruti. So, for the listeners, whoever are interested in getting in touch with us, our LinkedIn profile details, websites, and contact email IDs are
Contact email IDs.
all
Yeah.
available in the description. So, if everything amazed you or you want to discuss something that is relevant to your uh, understanding or of your use, definitely get in touch with us and get, I think, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see what kind of discussion that can we can come up with and make sure that those kind of wisdom is shared with you. So thank you for joining us. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you so much. It was great to
Bye.
be there on your channel. Thanks.
Thanks.